Hello, hi everyone. Welcome to today's session. My name is Satyam, and today we are going to talk about security and specifically about cyber security. So, in today's environment, what people are doing, what organizations are doing, they are creating their infrastructure, but they are not thinking of their security from third party agencies, which basically exploit their infrastructure. So in that session, how we can implement security, how can we understand whether our environment is safe or not. So we have certain benchmarks created from CIS. CIS is a group of intellectual people. They keep their eye open on the incoming threats, and they help you to provide some of the industry best practices by which you can perform a remediation on those infrastructure. So, what is basically CIS benchmark? CIS benchmarks revolves around cyber security. CIS is a non-profit organization established in the year 2000. CIS benchmarks are the collection of best practices for securing your IT system, software, and cloud network. So let's suppose you have created your infrastructure, and what happens is like you don't know whether your infrastructure is secure or not. Then you need to perform CIS benchmark assessment on your infrastructure. Okay, people are creating instances in cloud, specifically in AWS cloud. When you are creating your instances, you are not thinking of security. You are not thinking of hardened CIS images. So we'll tell you how can you make a secure environment, how can you make your servers strong, how can you save your servers. All those things we are going to talk about. CIS provide you a list of guidelines to companies to get them prevented from cyber attacks. So if you are dealing with if your application is customer facing, if your application is customer facing, a lot of people are accessing your application on daily basis, then there is high percentage of chance that your application might get infected with cyber attacks. So applications like Netflix, Flipkart, make my trip, and all those applications which are exposed to public, large number of audience are exposing using your application, and anybody can access your application with any kind of bad intentions. So how you can prevent your infrastructure against those threats? So CIS benchmarks help you to remediate all those issues. You can do that. CIS actively monitor cyber threats to help nationals and local government to prevent cyber security. So CIS benchmarks, basically it's a set of a standard. If you implement them on your infrastructure, then your infrastructure will be safe and secure. So coming to CIS benchmark profiles, we have two profiles in CIS benchmark. One is level 1 benchmark profile and another is level 2 benchmark profiles. So level 1 benchmark profile, it's cover base label, basic label configuration that are easily to implement and have minimal impact on the business. So if you can implement a level 1 benchmark profile that are easy to implement and which does not require any downtime and there is no business impact. Coming to level 2 business benchmarks profile, if you are thinking, the level 2 profiles is considered to be defense in depth, and it is implemented when security is paramount. So a lot of places where security is taken at high into consideration, then you have to implement level 2 benchmark profiles. Okay. Coming to how can you do this? So CIS basically provide hardened image. So you must be aware of AWS AMI. So in AWS AMI, if you go to AWS platform, let's go to AWS platform, and when you will try to create a instance, let's suppose specifically we are talking about AWS. When you try to create a instance, what you will observe that you will get a AMI. So there is a difference between this AMI. This is the AMI. This is the AMI that you will see. So this is the AMI. This is Amazon Linux 2 AMI, and there is another AMI which is available in marketplace. So if you are using this AMI is a plain AMI. There is nothing security implemented on this AMI. So you need to take this AMI and you need to implement security, you need to OS hardened policies you need to implement, and you can get another AMI created out of that. If you want to do so, that you can do. If you don't want, what you can do is you can go to AWS marketplace and you can search for benchmark images. So if you go for CIS benchmark images, you can search for CIS, and what you can see that CIS Amazon Linux 2 kernel. So this, if you want to find more information on this, so this CIAMI for Amazon Linux 2 kernel is a hardened in accordance with the associated CIS benchmark that has been developed on consequences of industry practices. There are certain highlights like hardened according to CIS benchmark ones and all those things. So using this AMI is much secure than using the plain AMI. So that's what is shown in my next slide. So now people, it's up to you whether you want to choose, whether you want to create your servers with plain AMI, or you want to create your servers with the help of CIS Amazon Linux 2 benchmarks AMIs. So these are the two AMIs which are available for common use. You can either choose the first option, or either you can go with the second option, but going with the second option is a good idea. So CIS also offers pre-configured hardened image for organizations. So you don't need to worry about what kind of patchings you need to do and all. So CIS also offers pre-configured hardened image. You can get those images from this particular link. So this is the link. If you go to this particular link, then you can observe that a lot of cloud providers are available in the market. They are lot of images are available for multiple cloud provider. So this CIS organization is providing images for AWS, it is providing images for Azure, it is providing for Google Cloud and other places. So images, CIS hardened image, are securely configured according to applicable CIS benchmarks. They are available on the top cloud providers. So AWS is number one cloud providers, and the CIS benchmark hardened image is available on AWS marketplace, where you can go and you can have it. Okay. The next thing that we need to do is like CIS benchmark is not only CIS benchmark images not only protect you from cyber attack and cyber threats, it also protect you from certain cyber security framework. So there are multiple organizations who are using PCI DSS, and HIPAA. These are some of the frameworks. So if your company is dealing with customer credit cards, if your company is storing, if your customer is storing credit card information of a user, then your organization has to be PCI DSS compliant and HIPAA compliant. So how can you do so? You can use CIS benchmark, to make sure that your organization infrastructure is compliant toward this. So CIS benchmarks help you to implement PCI DSS standards, HIPAA standards, and cybersecurity frameworks. Even if you are dealing with if you are dealing with customer data, certain countries has the laws that customers' data should reside in their own country itself. That's basically called as GDPR, that is General Data Protection Regulation. So you can implement GDPR, using CIS benchmark. So CIS benchmark help you to implement cybersecurity frameworks like PCI DSS, HIPAA, as well as data privacy regulation. So using CIS benchmark hardened image, you can you can safeguard your infrastructure not to use the plain AWS AMI to Linux. Instead of that, you can use the CIS Amazon Linux 2 AMIs as well. However, this CIS benchmarks are also available for Amazon EKS, and today we have a demo for that, and where we can show you how this benchmark, CIS benchmark, basically work on Amazon EKS cluster. So Kubernetes EKS benchmark consists of 4 sections, section 2, 3, 4, and 5. So basically section 2 is all about guidance for control plane logging and configuration. Section 3 is configuration checks for worker node and kubelets. Section 4 describe various recommendation for Kubernetes policies, and Section 5 security recommendation for AWS EKS. Just to help you understand, what are best practices you have to implement while creating a Kubernetes cluster. So you have to ensure that the clusters are created with private endpoint enabled and public access denied. It means if you want to create a cluster, you have to create a cluster where public access is denied. The cluster shall be accessible within a private infrastructure itself. So how can you implement CIS benchmark test on any Kubernetes cluster? So for that we have something called as kube-bench. So kube-bench is a tool provided by Aqua. So kube-bench is a tool provided by Aqua. Using kube-bench tool, you can validate whether your Kubernetes cluster is compliant against CIS or not. So for understanding that, we need to go to a page that is basically from the Kubernetes CIS benchmark. So Kubernetes is the de facto standard for container orchestration in today's world. And what this Kubernetes CIS benchmark does, so when you are implementing or when you are deploying a Kubernetes cluster within your organization, it's a good practice to perform a CIS benchmark check against your cluster to make sure your clusters justify all those requirements. So Kubernetes CIS benchmark is published by Center of Internet Security, and it's a non-profit organization that publishes cybersecurity best practices. So if you think about what can be the best practices, so control plane component. So as per CIS benchmark, so all those control plane component like API server, controller, scheduler, etcd, all these component has to be permission of 644 and the file ownership with the root and all those things. Subsequently, you can see what is the API server, what are the settings with API server that you have to do. So anonymous authentication has to be false, basic authentication false not set, anonymous authentication false. So you have seen that, so this is the configuration that need to be applied when you are creating a cluster, and CIS benchmark scan your cluster against these defined values. So how can we do so? So this is why we have a tool that is called as the bench, which has been created by Aqua Security, that as I told you, Aqua Security. So we'll take a look about kube-bench. Kube-bench is a tool. So it has written about kube-bench, small introduction, check whether Kubernetes is deployed according to the best security practices as defined in the CIS Kubernetes benchmark. So if we talk about this kube-bench, it is basically public, and what you can see that it is mainly designed in Go. So 97% of the code is written in the Go, and then 1.13 is Makefile and others is 1.14. So this kube-bench is what? Kube-bench is a tool that checks whether the Kubernetes is deployed securely by running the checks documented in the CIS Kubernetes benchmark. So Kubernetes benchmark documentation is that, and how can you implement those practices? How can you check whether your cluster is safe or not? You can do so with the help of this particular tool. So we'll try to do same. So we have a Kubernetes cluster which is basically running on AWS Amazon platform. So we have EKS cluster, and we'll show you how can we perform kube-bench check on our cluster. So this is my cluster. I have let's connect to the cluster. So kubectl get node. So if get nodes, if you there's this kubectl get node. So once you do this particular command, then what you will observe that you are able to connect to the cluster, and there are two worker nodes on the cluster. And as you know, this is a AWS EKS managed cluster, so we don't have update of we don't manage control plane. So control plane will be managed by Amazon itself. So now we are going to perform a kube-bench test on this particular cluster. So the steps are pretty simple. So let's go to the documentation page. So what it says, there is a file which is provided over here. So you can open this file. This is the piece of file. You need to deploy this particular job on your Kubernetes cluster, then what will happen is this job will validate your cluster again. So it's very easy to use. Let's go and try to implement the same. So I have taken a copy of this particular file. I will take a copy of this particular content from this particular place, and I will go to, so I have already copied, but I will update this again. So this is my YAML file. So what I have done is I have taken this particular manifest from kube-bench GitHub page. I will put those GitHub page link in the description. And let's connect to the cluster and I'll try to deploy this. So kubectl apply -f, and then so kube name of the file is kube-bench.yaml, kube-bench.yaml, and what you need to do is you need to hit enter. What will happen is this command will deploy the YAML manifest, and you will see a batch job has been created, kubectl get pod. If you do so, a pod has been created in the default namespace, and once the output will come, what you need to do is you need to check the logs. So you need to check the logs what kube-bench have done. So kube-bench might have done his checks, as it's a new cluster. It's a cluster without any workload. So 2kh and 9 is the name of the pod. So kubectl log -f and hit the pod name. What you will observe that the logs of this particular pod will be populating. Okay, so now this is the output of the log, and what you can see in the summary, if you think about the summary, so the summary here is 14 check pass, 0 check fail, 37 warning, 0 checks info. So guys, we have done a kube-bench test on my AWS EKS cluster. Cluster version is 1.21.1. So this is the version of the cluster, and on this cluster we have done this particular check, and we have done this particular check on this particular cluster, and we haven't get any of the errors. However, we have get certain warnings. So what we can do is you can go up and you can check a lot of other things. So you can see that 5, so 4, what are these 4, and then you will see like 3, and then you will see, so okay, so it is from 3. Okay, so what is 3 dot this? So according to the documentation that I have, according to this PPT, you might have seen that these are the sections. So every section consists of something. So the section number 3, section 3, it's all about configuration checks for worker node and kubelet. So this is going to tell you about the worker node and the kubelet. So there are total around 12 and 13 checks in the section 3, out of which certain sections are passed and certain sections are info, certain sections are passed and certain sections are warning. So if you see on the top in the section 3, the kube-bench has done validation for worker nodes and kubelet. Here is the warning. It says, ensure that the event record ops argument is set to 0 level, which ensures appropriate event capture. So this is something which is giving warning, and this need to be fixed. Now it is giving remediation. It is already giving remediation 3.29 for section 3.29. If using kubelet config file, edit this particular appropriate value. So it is not only identifying the potential breach, it is not only identifying the potential configuration mismatch or not the best security practice being implemented, it is also identifying and it is also giving you remediation steps. So out of 14 checks, so in section 3 it has done 14 checks, and out of 1 warning is throw. 1 warning it has given, and section 3 is all about the configuration check of worker node and kubelet. Now think of section 4. In section 4, describe various recommendations for Kubernetes policies. So we'll talk about Kubernetes policies. So as you can see that, So section 4 is all about policy, and these are the sections that is being checked. These are the areas that we need to understand. So policies, RBAC and security account, ensure that the cluster admin role only required, and all those things, out of which you can see a lot of warnings are there, lot of warnings are there, and according to that, remediation plan is also given. So based on that, you have to create a cluster. You have to make sure that you should not be any error, you should not be any warning coming when you are running kube-bench test. So these are the remediation policies which are already provided by kube-bench. You can go and you can take. So like it's saying, create a PSP as described in the Kubernetes documentation, ensuring that a .spec.privilege field is omitted or set to failed. PSP is basically the pod security policies. And now at the last, when we go and we see the top, the service number 5. So when you go and see the service number 5 is like security recommendation, recommended for AWS EKS. So these are the security recommendation for AWS EKS, and out of that it has done total 14 checks and 37 warning. No, so there's like 0 check pass, 13 checks warning. So this is no recommendation has been given by for this. And guys, you must be checking that section number 2 is not there. So guidance for control plane logging and configuration. So AWS control plane is managed by Amazon itself. This is why kube-bench has not given any recommendation. It has not validated any type of test. It has not done test on that particular part. So only we got output for section 3, section 4 and section 5. So however, this is the overall result, guys. So this helps you to implement, this helps you to create your Kubernetes cluster with the best security practices. So that's it from here, from this particular session. Thanks for watching. If you have not seen my video on how to create an Amazon EKS cluster, then please have a look to the channel. So there is a separate video for creating Amazon EKS cluster. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.